Hello everyone and welcome back to Living in Lapland. I'm Tina.
And I'm Sami. Great to have you with us again.
Today we're talking about something very practical for life up here in Finnish Lapland, preparing firewood for the long winter months ahead. Sami, you just made quite a big purchase recently, didn't you?
Oh yes, I did. Last week I bought 18 cubic meters of birch timber. That's quite a lot of wood, actually.
18 cubic meters? That sounds enormous. Can you help our listeners understand just how much wood that is?
Well, imagine a pile of logs that's about 3 meters long, 3 meters wide, and 2 meters high. That's roughly what we're talking about.
Wow, that's like the size of a small room.
Exactly. And the thing is, this should be enough firewood to heat my house for about 2 to 3 winters, depending on how cold it gets.
That's amazing forward planning. But I'm guessing the wood doesn't arrive ready to burn, right?
Oh no, definitely not. The timber arrives as whole logs, some of them 2 or 3 meters long. So now I have a big summer project ahead of me.
Right. So what's the process? What do you need to do to turn these logs into proper firewood?
Well, first I need to cut all the logs into the right length for my wood stove. In Finland, we usually cut them to about 33 centimeters, or roughly 13 inches.
Okay.
After cutting, then comes the really hard work, splitting. The bigger pieces need to be split with an axe or a hydraulic wood splitter so they'll fit in the stove and dry properly.
That sounds like quite a workout. How long does it take to process 18 cubic meters?
If I work maybe 2 or 3 hours every weekend, it'll probably take me most of the summer. It's not something you want to rush through in one go, believe me.
Right. And then after you've cut and split everything, what happens next?
The most important part, stacking and seasoning. I need to stack all the wood in a way that allows air to flow through it. We call this kuivaus in Finnish, the drying process.
Kuivaus. That's a useful word for our English learners. So the wood needs to dry out completely before you can use it?
Exactly. Fresh wood, or what we call green wood, has too much moisture content. If you try to burn it, it won't create much heat and it makes a lot of smoke.
And probably not good for your chimney either, I imagine.
That's right. Wet wood can create creosote buildup in the chimney, which is actually dangerous. So proper seasoning is really important for safety reasons too.
Now you mentioned that early spring is the best time to buy timber. Why is that?
Oh, that's a great question. In winter, the trees are basically dormant. The sap isn't flowing like it does in summer, so the wood has less water content to begin with.
That makes sense.
If you buy timber that was cut in late winter or early spring, you're already starting with drier wood. That means it seasons faster during the summer months.
Smart timing. And you mentioned birch specifically. Is there a reason you chose birch over other types of wood?
Birch is excellent for heating. It burns hot and clean, and it's very common here in Finland. Pine is cheaper, but birch gives you more heat per log.
More bang for your buck, as we say. So you stack it all summer, and then when does it become ready to burn?
Well, if I process it this spring and stack it properly with good airflow, it should be ready for the following winter. So basically 1 full summer of drying.
That's a long wait, so you're really planning ahead.
You have to think ahead when you live up here. The winters are long and cold. We're talking about 6 months where temperatures can drop to minus 30 or 40 Celsius.
Wow, that's really cold. For our international listeners, that's minus 20 to minus 40 Fahrenheit.
Right. And when it gets that cold, having a good supply of dry firewood isn't just about comfort. It's about survival. Your main heating system might break down, or you might lose electricity.
So the wood stove is like a backup system?
For many of us, it's actually the primary heating system. My house has both electric heating and a wood stove, but I rely mainly on wood because it's much more economical.
And probably cozier too, right? There's something special about a real fire.
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing quite like sitting by a crackling fire when it's dark and snowy outside. It creates this wonderful atmosphere that electric heating just can't match.
Now I have to ask, where do you store 18 cubic meters of wood? That's not going to fit in most people's garages.
No, definitely not. I have a special woodshed in my backyard. It's basically 3 walls and a roof, open on one side so the wind can blow through and help with the drying process.
So the design is quite important for proper seasoning.
Yes, exactly. The wood needs to be protected from rain and snow, but it also needs airflow. You don't want it completely enclosed because then the moisture can't escape.
And I guess you need to think about how you stack it too?
Oh yes, there's definitely technique involved. You want to leave gaps between the pieces so air can circulate. Some people stack it in crisscross patterns. Others prefer neat rows with spaces.
It sounds like there's a real art to it.
There is. And it's actually quite satisfying work. There's something very peaceful about spending a Saturday afternoon stacking wood. It's meditative almost.
I can imagine. Very different from city life. Now, for our listeners who might be thinking about heating with wood, are there any safety considerations they should know about?
Oh, absolutely. First, make sure your chimney is clean and inspected regularly. Second, only burn dry, seasoned wood. Never painted wood, treated lumber, or trash.
Good point.
And always have smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors in your house. Wood heating is very safe when done properly, but you need to respect the fire.
Excellent advice. Well, Sami, it sounds like you have quite a productive summer ahead of you. Any final thoughts about this whole firewood project?
It's funny. People might think it's old-fashioned to heat with wood in the 21st century, but here in Lapland, it just makes sense. It's economical, reliable, and there's something very satisfying about being self-sufficient.
And very connected to the local environment and traditions too.
Exactly. My grandfather heated his house the same way, and probably his grandfather before him. There's something nice about that continuity.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's episode. Thank you so much, Sami, for sharing your firewood wisdom with us.
My pleasure, Tina. I hope our listeners found it interesting.
Well, this has been absolutely fascinating, Sami. From buying and processing the wood to the community aspects and environmental considerations, you've given our listeners a complete picture of what wood heating really involves here in Lapland. Thank you so much for sharing all this valuable information with us. And thank you to all our listeners for joining us on Living in Lapland. Next week, we'll be talking about the midnight sun phenomenon and how it affects daily life during the summer months here. Until then, keep learning and keep exploring. Before we finish up, I'm curious about the tools you need for all this work. Obviously, you mentioned an axe and maybe a hydraulic splitter. What else does someone need to get started with processing their own firewood?
Well, you definitely need a good chainsaw for cutting the logs to length. I have a mid-size Husqvarna that served me well for years. You'll also want safety equipment, protective chaps, a helmet with ear protection and face shield, steel-toed boots. Safety first when working with chainsaws.
That sounds like quite an investment in equipment. For someone just starting out, what would you estimate the total cost to be, both for the tools and for 18 cubic meters of birch timber?
The 18 cubic meters of birch cost me about 1,200 euros this year. That's roughly 65 euros per cubic meter. As for tools, a decent chainsaw runs 300 to 500 euros, safety gear another 200, and a good splitting axe maybe 80 euros. So you're looking at maybe 600 to 80 euros for basic equipment that will last many years.
When you factor in heating costs, that actually sounds quite reasonable. Now, you mentioned birch being better than pine. Are there other types of wood that people use here in Lapland?
Yes, definitely. Birch is the premium choice, but pine and spruce are much cheaper, maybe 35 to 40 euros per cubic meter. Pine burns quickly and is great for getting a fire started. Some people also use aspen, which burns cleanly but doesn't give as much heat. And if you can get it, oak is fantastic, but it's quite expensive here in the north.
I imagine processing that much wood is quite a social activity too. Do neighbors help each other out with these big projects?
Oh, absolutely. We call it talkoot, community work days. Usually several neighbors will get together on a weekend and will process one person's wood pile together. With 4 or 5 people working, you can get through a lot of wood in a day. Plus, someone usually brings coffee and cake, so it becomes quite a nice social event.
That sounds wonderful. Now, from an environmental perspective, is wood heating considered sustainable here in Finland? I know there's always debate about cutting down trees versus other energy sources.
That's a great question. In Finland, forestry is very well managed. The trees I bought were harvested as part of sustainable forest management. They thin out forests to help the remaining trees grow better. And wood is carbon neutral when you think about it. The trees absorb CO2 while growing, and they release it back when they burn. It's part of the natural cycle.
That's reassuring to know. For any of our listeners who might be inspired to try wood heating themselves, what would be your top piece of advice? What mistakes should they avoid?
Start small. Don't buy 18 cubic meters like I did. Try 2 or 3 cubic meters the first year to see how much you actually need. The biggest mistake people make is not planning for storage space. Also, many beginners underestimate how long the seasoning process takes. If you buy green wood in summer, don't expect to burn it that same winter.
And what about maintaining the wood stove itself? I imagine that's important for efficiency and safety.
Very important. I clean my chimney at least twice during the heating season, once in the middle of winter and once at the end. The glass door needs regular cleaning too, and you should empty the ash pan frequently. A well-maintained stove burns much more efficiently and safely. I also have a professional inspection done every few years.